The year was 1831. When something happened that would forever change America. A man, once a preacher, once enslaved, claimed he saw visions from God. Visions that told him the sky would darken. And the time for justice had come. His name was Nat Turner. And on one night in August, he led a rebellion that made slave owners tremble, and history remember his name in fear. This is the story of Nat Turner's rebellion, the uprising that tried to set the enslaved free. And ended in a river of blood. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because every week, we uncover the stories the world tried to forget. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is as you hear this voice. Let's see who's listening from the farthest corner of the world. Because what you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a warning, wrapped in time. To understand what unfolded, we must go back. Before the rebellion. Before the blood. Before the night when everything changed. The South in the 1830s was a place built on control. Not just chains on wrists, but chains on minds. Where every sunrise meant labor, and every sunset meant survival. A world where even a whisper could cost a life. In Southampton County, Virginia, life moved to the rhythm of cruelty. Men were property. Women were possessions. Children were born into bondage before they even drew their first breath. And in that darkness, one man listened for something beyond the pain. A voice. A vision. A meaning to it all. Nat Turner was born into slavery on October 2, 1800. From the beginning, everyone said he was different. He didn't play like the other children. He didn't laugh much. He would wander off alone, staring at the sky as if waiting for something only he could see. Those who raised him whispered that he could remember things before he was born. That he spoke of stories and visions he could not have known. Some said it was madness. Others said, it was prophecy. As he grew, he learned to read, secretly. The Bible became his weapon, his comfort, and his curse. Every verse he read seemed to burn through him, filling him with both faith and fury. He began to see visions, flashes of angels and battles. Blood dripping from the cornfields. The heavens shaking. The sky darkening like smoke. And in those moments, Nat believed he was chosen. Chosen not just to preach, but to act. He told the enslaved people around him that freedom was coming. That God himself had spoken to him. And that the sign would come when the sun turned black. And one day, it did. In February 1831, a solar eclipse darkened the sky over Virginia. The world turned gray. The birds went silent. And in that silence, Nat Turner fell to his knees. He saw it as a divine signal. He knew then, the time had come. But Nat couldn't do it alone. He began to gather others, men he trusted, men who had nothing left to lose. There was Hart Travis, strong and silent. Henry Porter, the preacher's friend. Sam Francis, who could read the stars. And Nelson, who had seen too much suffering to stay still. They met in secret, in barns, in woods, in silence. Each time they spoke, they risked their lives. But they believed they were no longer just men. They were instruments. The swords of prophecy. They waited for the right moment. Weeks turned to months. And then, it rained. The first plan was for July 4th, the day America celebrated its independence. But heavy rain flooded the roads, the sign, Turner said, that God wanted them to wait. They waited. And on August 21, 1831, Nat Turner looked up at the sky. The moon was full. A strange red glow wrapped around it, like blood. To him, that was the final sign. He gathered his men. 9 of them. Each with a weapon, a hatchet, an axe, a blade, whatever their hands could hold. Before they left, Nat prayed. He asked God for courage and forgiveness. They were not soldiers. They were not trained. They were men who had been pushed beyond human endurance. And that night, they rose not just for themselves, but for every voice that had been silenced. And so, with trembling hands and hearts full of fire, they walked quietly into the darkness, toward the house of Joseph Travis, Turner's enslaver. They carried more than weapons that night. They carried centuries of pain, faith twisted by fear, and the fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, freedom was worth the cost. When they reached the door, Nat Turner looked back once, then whispered, "Now is the time." It was the dead of night. No stars. No sound. Just the heavy breath of men about to change history. The door opened. And time stood still. What happened next can't be softened. It was brutal. Raw. A lifetime of pain released in a single night. Joseph Travis, and his family, were the first. In Turner's eyes, it was God's judgment. But in truth, it was the first drop in a storm of blood that no one could stop. They moved swiftly, house to house. Each man knew what it meant if they failed. Each strike was meant to send a message. By dawn, they had freed some, and killed others. Word spread through whispers, screams, and smoke. The rebellion had begun. In the early light of August 22, 1831, the world of Southampton County woke up. And the fear began to spread faster than fire. Turner and his men pressed forward, to the Waller plantation, then the Reese family, then the Whiteheads. In every home, chaos. In every heart, terror. In every step, Nat Turner whispered scripture, believing God walked beside him. But there's a truth about violence. Once it starts, it changes everything. Even the righteous become haunted. Even the chosen start to question their calling. Nat Turner believed he was freeing his people. But in that moment, even he began to wonder. Was this deliverance? Or damnation? Still, he pressed on. Because he believed it was too late to turn back. The die was cast. And the heavens demanded it. By mid-morning, nearly 40 enslaved men had joined the uprising. They rode on stolen horses, carrying axes, clubs, and faith. Some joined out of conviction. Others out of desperation. But all were fueled by one thought. Freedom, or death. But word traveled fast. Too fast. The first warning reached the town of Jerusalem, now called Cortland. Within hours, white militias and vigilantes began to gather. And that's when the balance began to shift. The rebellion was spreading. But so was revenge. By nightfall, confusion reigned. Many enslaved people who had nothing to do with the rebellion were killed on sight. Whites armed themselves. Neighbors turned on neighbors. And Turner's vision of divine liberation was twisting into something darker, uncontrollable. If you're still watching right now, you're part of the few who don't just scroll past pain. You face it. Before we continue, subscribe and turn on the bell. Because the next stories we tell are ones most people can't bear to look at. And if you don't want to subscribe, tell me why in the comments. Was this story too heavy? Too real? Or are you brave enough to keep watching the truth unfold? Now. This is where everything began to spiral out of control. In the chaos, some of Turner's men began to hesitate, others became reckless. Some drank, some argued. The unity that once felt divine began to fracture. Turner tried to hold them together. He told them the Spirit was still with them. That victory was near. But the sky was already changing. The fires they lit had drawn the hunters. Militia men were coming. Hundreds of them. And they had one order. Kill them all. The rebellion that began with prophecy was about to be drowned in blood. And for Nat Turner, the prophecy wasn't over. It was only turning into something far more tragic, and far more human. The rebellion that once roared like thunder, was now fading into whispers of fear. The fire that Nat Turner ignited, the fire that made even the heavens tremble, was being smothered, one ember at a time. For 6 days, Turner and his followers fought, moved through plantations like shadows in the night. But by the 7th sunrise, the resistance was breaking. Militia forces, 100 strong, swept through Southampton County with no mercy. Men, women, even children, anyone suspected of rebellion, were chained, beaten, or killed without trial. The same land that once echoed with hymns of hope, now wept with cries of vengeance. Nat Turner watched his people fall, one by one. The dream he saw in visions, the freedom he believed was written in the stars, was now buried beneath the soil of the South. And so, he ran. For 2 months, he hid in the woods, surviving on roots, rainwater, and faith. By day, he lay buried beneath fallen leaves. By night, he whispered prayers into the darkness, asking if heaven had turned its back, or if his mission was meant to fail. Then, one cold October morning, a farmer discovered him, hidden beneath a hollow tree trunk. Starved. Weak. But still holding his Bible. The Spirit spoke, and I obeyed. They dragged him to court like a ghost, his eyes sunken, his voice calm. Even as they read the charges, Nat Turner did not plead. He said no man could silence what God had commanded. And when the judge asked if he felt remorse, was not Christ crucified? Those were his last words before they took him, November 11, 1831. They hanged him in silence. No crowd cheers, no prayer. Just the wind and the creaking of the rope. But even then, his story didn't end. Because as his body fell, his name rose. They thought they'd killed the rebellion. But they only buried a seed. A seed that would rise again, in whispers of freedom. In echoes of justice. And in every voice that dares to say, enough. Before we end, remember, history doesn't fade. It waits for listeners like you, to give it life again. Nat Turner's rebellion ended in blood. But his story didn't die on that cold November morning. Because truth, real truth, has a way of haunting those who bury it. They tried to erase his name from the pages of history. But every generation that dares to ask why, every voice that questions injustice, is, in some way, answering him. He was called a murderer by some, a prophet by others. But maybe, just maybe, he was a mirror, reflecting everything America didn't want to see in itself. If this story moved you, don't leave without subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Because every day, we bring the voices of the past back to life. Stories that still echo through time. Stories that make you feel, think, and remember. And if you choose not to subscribe, tell me why in the comments. Was it too real? Too heavy? Too raw? Or maybe it made you question what you thought you knew about history? Drop a comment below. What part of this story shocked you the most? Was it the rebellion, the visions, or his final words? I read every single comment, because your thoughts matter. And before you go, remember this, the past isn't gone. It's alive. In every heartbeat that still seeks justice. In every voice brave enough to remember the forgotten. You are that voice.